David Desroches. He's a professor at Fire Marshall Institute and a former Pentagon director of Arabian Peninsula Affairs. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you for staying with us tonight. Obviously, you did hear the entire Trump speech. Are you any wiser, let's say, than yesterday as to what the Iranian plan or strategy is moving forward? Will the U.S. continue with this war, do you think?
I think the U.S. will continue this war. I think the Iranian strategy is to focus on spreading the war into different areas, preferably undefended areas like attacking GCC civilian infrastructure, to generate the impression of momentum in the global population and the media space. The U.S. and Israeli strategy is kind of monotonous. It's basically working down a target list every day and every night. Sometimes the targets are adjusted, but it's pretty static. What's new is the introduction of possible ground forces, Marines, and paratroopers. That will cause the Iranians to have to move, have to expose themselves to danger. They can't just hide in bunkers. The only thing I really took out of the speech that was interesting was Trump's remark that there were unexpected capabilities in the Iranians. I think he was laying the groundwork there for making the case that the war, when he's criticized for the war that he said would be over by now, I think that's kind of laying the groundwork there to say, well, there was more there than we thought. It's
taking perhaps a little bit longer than they thought. But Trump did say also in that speech that Iran is no longer a threat. What evidence has been provided by the US so far on whether they are achieving those objectives?
Well, I don't think they have provided evidence on it. I think, they've asserted several times that they've destroyed the nuclear program. But, we've seen in the Washington Post speculation that there may be operations to exfiltrate what's left of Iran's highly enriched uranium stockpiles. With the missiles, they're no longer a military threat per se. It's more of a harassment threat, and the missiles tend to be directed against civilian targets, which are, not defended the way military targets are. So you could make the case there, and in military terms, that they've been neutralized, but that's scant consolation for cities that are, as your correspondent just described, under attack. I think that that case still has to be made, and it will be a while. I think a few more days, maybe a few more weeks before we see a definitive military effect of this targeting. You can show a number of key capacities that have been destroyed, storage facilities. There was a missile city in Isfahan that was destroyed yesterday. It was just spectacular footage of the explosion. But those are all inputs. The output is, when the missiles stop, when Iran doesn't have the ability to strike neutral civilian shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. We're not there yet.
Well, speaking of the Strait of Hormuz, he sort of seemed to take a step back on that, really, saying that it was up to those that are using it to figure out what to do next. And in fact, he sort of said we can help or we can assist, but it's really up to them. And then he suggested for countries to be able to buy oil from the US. What did you make of that plan?
Well, when Trump speaks, his speech tonight, he had three separate audiences, and the messages were not always synchronized. So for the domestic American audience, he has to say, look, this has taken a little bit longer than we thought, but it's worth it. This is a 50-year problem for the United States. We're going to solve it, and we'll solve it quickly, but there's momentary inconvenience. He didn't explicitly state that. That's what I got. For the Iranians, the message was, we're here as long as it takes, and you haven't seen anything yet. If you don't behave, you're going to get even more. And he made explicit threats against the electricity grid and even the petroleum facilities. For the traditional partners of the United States who are not involved in this war, And Trump speaks in an indisciplined manner, so he refers them as NATO, but I think he's lumping in groups like the Australians and the Japanese and South Koreans who are not in NATO. I think he was trying to get them to.
Perhaps at times he says that, but he has said, threatened to withdraw completely from NATO, and that was a recent threat.
Yeah. Yeah, he has. Well, no, he has animus for that, but he generally tends to regard the developed world, the natural community of America's partners and allies, and he'll use NATO as shorthand. I agree with you. He does both at the same time. You have to. It's sometimes maddening, but you have to. But anyhow, his message there is. I am solving a security problem for you. You are complaining about an economic problem that does not really affect us. You need to get involved. And obviously, the motivation of that is first to relieve the strain on the U.S. force. And then secondly, I think it will allow him domestically to say, you see, I'm leading the world, which most Americans think is kind of our natural role in the world. So there's different messages for different audiences, and sometimes those messages don't exactly sync up.
All right. Thank you very much for your thoughts there. David DeRoche.